Los Angeles has always been a city of contrasts, a playground for the wealthy and a battleground for the rest. Once a beacon of opportunity, it now finds itself suffocating under the weight of unchecked luxury development, corporate greed, and real estate speculation. The consequences are devastating. The middle class, once the backbone of LA, is being priced out of existence and forced into homelessness at an unprecedented rate. In 2025, homelessness in Los Angeles surged by an alarming 35%, bringing the total to 195,000 individuals. What was once seen as a crisis primarily affecting the poor has now engulfed the middle class. Teachers, nurses, and office workers, people who once thrived in the city, are now sleeping in their cars, sheltering in motels, or couch surfing with friends. The argument that more housing supply will bring down prices has proven to be a myth in LA's manipulated market. Developers aren't building for the average worker. They're catering to the ultra-rich and foreign investors who park their wealth in empty high-rise condos. These luxury developments often sit vacant, while longtime residents are forced onto the streets. The concept of trickle-down housing has failed spectacularly, benefiting only those at the top while squeezing out the middle class and decimating any remnants of affordability. Real estate speculation has also played a major role. Corporate landlords and institutional investors have snapped up properties across the city, converting single-family homes into high-rent properties or flipping entire apartment buildings into upscale rentals. This shift has left many middle-class renters with no viable options. Rent control measures, while helpful, have been eroded by loopholes and aggressive eviction tactics. Property owners looking to cash in on soaring property values have pushed out tenants, replacing them with higher-paying occupants or short-term vacation rentals that further deplete available housing. The consequences of this forced displacement are dire, with more middle-class residents falling into homelessness. The social fabric of the city is unraveling. Schools are seeing an increase in students experiencing housing instability. Hospitals are treating more cases of stress-related illnesses linked to economic insecurity, and once thriving communities are being hollowed out. The city is losing not just its middle class, but also its identity as a place of opportunity and upward mobility. The rich aren't just making life difficult for the middle class. They are actively reshaping the city to serve their own interests. If Los Angeles is to reverse course, bold action is required. Rent stabilization must be strengthened, corporate landlords must be held accountable, and luxury development must be curtailed in favor of truly affordable housing. Without immediate intervention, LA will continue its transformation into a city where only the ultra-wealthy can live comfortably while the rest are left to fend for themselves in an increasingly hostile landscape. Los Angeles is at a breaking point. The question is no longer whether the middle class will survive here. It is whether the city itself can survive without them. If the current trends persist, LA will cease to be a city of opportunity and become a playground for the elite, surrounded by an ever-growing sea of displaced residents struggling to survive. The landlord's game, profiting from scarcity. Imagine getting a notice that your rent is going up by $500 with no increase in your paycheck. This isn't hypothetical. It's the reality for countless Angelenos. The housing crisis in Los Angeles has reached an alarming level, where the middle class is teetering on the edge of homelessness, while the wealthy accumulate multiple properties, often for investment rather than necessity. The average housing price has soared over $1 million, pricing out many longtime residents and fueling an ever-growing homelessness crisis. At the heart of this issue is the financialization of housing, where corporate landlords, real estate investment trusts REITs, and private investors prioritize profit over people. Large institutional investors have been aggressively buying up single-family homes and apartment buildings, treating them as lucrative assets rather than places for people to live. This speculative approach reduces available housing stock for regular buyers, driving up costs and creating artificial scarcity. The result? Families who once could afford a modest home now find themselves outbid by cash offers from hedge funds and investment groups. Compounding the issue is the widespread use of no-fault evictions, where tenants are displaced not for failure to pay rent, but because landlords see an opportunity to bring in higher-paying tenants. Even rent-controlled units are not immune, as landlords find loopholes to push out long-term renters and reset prices at market rates. The Ellis Act, originally intended to allow landlords to exit the rental business, has become a tool for mass evictions, further depleting affordable housing options. The consequences of this predatory housing system are stark. The number of people experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles has surged, with encampments sprawling across sidewalks, underpasses, and parks. The very people who once had stable jobs and homes are now forced to live in their cars or seek shelter in overcrowded facilities. Meanwhile, luxury condos and high-end apartment complexes sit half-empty, held as speculative investments rather than homes. In times of crisis, the landlord's game in Los Angeles does not stop. It accelerates. As wildfires ravage the city, reducing entire neighborhoods to ashes and displacing over 275,000 people, opportunistic landlords saw an opportunity to inflate rents. In some cases, rent hikes surged by as much as 124%, blatantly violating California's anti-price gouging laws. A 5-bedroom property in Santa Monica that rented for $12,500 per month in early 2024 was suddenly relisted for $28,000. In Woodland Hills, a modest 2-bedroom home saw its rent jump from $3,900 to $5,900 in mere weeks. Although California law prohibits rent increases above 10% during a state of emergency, enforcement has been weak. This ongoing crisis is not just a failure of policy, but a moral indictment of a system that treats housing as a commodity rather than a basic human need. As long as profit continues to dictate the housing market, the gap between the wealthy and the struggling will widen, and homelessness will remain a persistent and growing issue in Los Angeles. Without bold action, such as stricter rent controls, enforcement of existing laws, and policies that prioritize housing as a right rather than an investment, the city's housing crisis will only deepen, leaving thousands more without a place to call home. The wage gap scam, the hidden truth. The American dream promises that hard work leads to success. But for many in Los Angeles, that dream has become a cruel mirage. The cost of living has skyrocketed while wages remain stagnant, trapping working-class and middle-class families in an endless cycle of financial struggle. The notion that holding down 2 or 3 jobs will lead to stability is proving to be a lie, as inflation, the gig economy, and the lack of living wage jobs make it nearly impossible for families to get ahead. Instead of climbing the socioeconomic ladder, many are slipping into homelessness, a tragic consequence of the widening wage gap. One of the most devastating factors driving this crisis is inflation. In Los Angeles, the cost of basic necessities has risen dramatically. Housing is the most obvious example. The median home price is around $1 million, compared to a national median of $375,000. Renting is equally unaffordable, with a 2-bedroom apartment averaging $3,070 per month, nearly $1,200 more than the national average. Meanwhile, wages have failed to keep pace with these skyrocketing costs. A person earning California's minimum wage of $16 per hour would need to work over 190 hours a month just to afford a modest apartment, leaving little room for other essential expenses like food, transportation, and health care. The relentless increase in living costs forces people into precarious financial situations, making them one unexpected expense away from eviction. Beyond housing, the daily cost of survival in Los Angeles is exorbitant. Groceries cost about 17% more than the national average, while gas prices are typically 30% to 40% higher. Commutes are longer due to traffic congestion, leading to increased fuel costs and wear and tear on vehicles. Utility bills are among the highest in the country, adding another financial burden to struggling households. Even necessities like health care cost 7% more than the national average. Every aspect of life in Los Angeles demands a higher paycheck, yet most wages have barely budged, leaving workers with no choice but to cut back on essentials or accumulate debt just to get by. A crucial aspect of the wage gap trap is the lack of living wage jobs. Despite Los Angeles' booming economy in certain industries, many available jobs fail to provide a sustainable income. While high-income earners in sectors like technology and entertainment continue to accumulate wealth, lower-income workers in retail, food service, and manual labor struggle to survive. The state's progressive income tax structure, with rates as high as 12.3% for top earners, does little to alleviate the burden on those making far less. Additionally, sales taxes and the high cost of goods mean that even those earning a moderate income find themselves financially stretched. Without access to well-paying jobs, many Angelenos are caught in a cycle where working harder only leads to exhaustion rather than economic stability. The consequences of this wage gap trap are devastating. Housing insecurity is at an all-time high, with many families forced into overcrowded living situations, extended commutes, or even homelessness. A significant portion of tenants in Los Angeles spend more than 35% of their income on rent, far beyond the recommended threshold for housing affordability. With no disposable income left for emergencies, medical bills, or savings, the middle class is eroding, and the line between financial stability and homelessness is thinner than ever. The rich continue to get richer, while the middle class falls further behind. The American dream, once a symbol of hope and upward mobility, is now a mirage for millions struggling to keep up with the relentless rise in living costs. Hard work is no longer a guarantee of success. For many, it is merely a means of survival. Until wages rise in tandem with living expenses and more protections are put in place for workers, the wage gap trap will continue to swallow those who once believed in the promise of prosperity. Without systemic change, Los Angeles and other major cities will continue to see the heartbreaking reality of the working class slipping into homelessness, proving that in today's economy, working hard is no longer enough to get ahead. When real estate becomes a weapon, Los Angeles, once the city of dreams, has become a playground for speculators who see homes not as shelter, but as assets to be traded, flipped, and exploited. Real estate in LA is no longer primarily about providing housing for its residents. Instead, it has morphed into a financial instrument, a means of accumulating wealth for investors who may never even set foot in the neighborhoods they disrupt. This transformation, fueled by foreign investment, short-term rentals, and an underwhelming commitment to affordable housing, has turned a fundamental human need into a luxury few can afford. Foreign investment has played a significant role in reshaping LA's housing market. For years, international buyers have poured money into high-end real estate, treating properties as secure places to park wealth rather than as homes for local families. These investments drive up housing prices, making it nearly impossible for average residents to buy or even rent in their own city. Empty luxury condos sit unoccupied while thousands sleep on the streets. The speculative cycle continues as properties are bought and sold in rapid succession, their values inflated by the very forces that make homeownership unattainable for many Angelenos. Compounding the problem is the explosion of short-term rental platforms like Airbnb, which have further distorted the housing market. Investors snatch up properties, not to house long-term tenants, but to turn them into profit-generating vacation rentals. Neighborhoods once rich with culture and stability are now riddled with transient visitors, eroding community ties and pushing long-time residents out. As landlords realize they can make far more money renting to tourists than the local renters, they convert apartments and homes into full-time short-term rentals, effectively removing them from the already scarce rental supply. The result? Rising rents, increased evictions, and a city that increasingly caters to visitors rather than its own people. Despite the glaring need for affordable housing, LA's development priorities have largely favored luxury construction. Towering glass condos and high-end apartments continue to dominate the skyline, while the working-class residents who keep the city running are left struggling to find a place to live. The city's failure to mandate sufficient affordable housing within new developments only exacerbates the crisis. Even when affordable units are included, the definition of affordable often skews toward higher income brackets, leaving the lowest income residents out of the equation. Zoning laws, NIMBY opposition, and bureaucratic red tape further stifle construction of truly affordable housing, ensuring that supply never catches up with demand. What emerges from this landscape is a city increasingly divided, where wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few, and the dream of homeownership remains out of reach for the many. The fundamental purpose of housing has been twisted beyond recognition. Instead of homes being places of security and stability, they have become speculative investments, empty shells, or transient lodging for tourists. The people of Los Angeles deserve better. Without bold policy changes, such as stricter regulations on foreign investment, stronger tenant protections, and aggressive commitments to affordable housing, LA will continue to be a speculator's playground, where profits always trump people.